I'll now reintroduce Alistair Crawford from Adama. The video there that we had with Alistair featured Greta Duff from Southern Farming Systems as well, and we were looking at barley disease management and drilling into the major diseases that we see in the high rainfall zone. So Al, would you like to give us a bit of an introduction to your trial in the video?
Yep, no worries. Yeah, so we're in the video, we're appearing and reappearing magically, which is a bit of fun. Yeah, we're looking at scald, net form and net blotch, and spot form. So Adama we've probably got something like 20 trials in Victoria with fungicides. So we spend a lot of time trying to find things that are improving, get better control. Look at a lot of mixing, so to make sure that we can mix, give a lot of flexibility in what we can do. So we do all that mixing work, have a look to see what we can and can't do, and try and make it as flexible, especially the Western District. It's really important that we can do as much as we can in one spray because of the conditions and the wet. So we do a lot of work to try and do that. Yeah, so we've got the trial there looking at the range of barley fungicides, and we've got, which fungi you tend to get, depends on which variety you've got. So, for example, Gardner or Planet is very susceptible to scald, so you can get quite dramatic effects with scald if you're not very susceptible, or something like Compass, which is very susceptible to leaf scald, so you tend to get that more in Compass. So yeah, we're looking to improve. We've got, in the video we talk about a new fungicide we'll have registered next year, which is called Maxensis, which is prothioconazole plus Strabi, which is the first time we've had prothioconazole mixed with the Strabi in Australia, which is very common overseas, but now we're able to do it in Australia. So yeah, it's good. Come here. I'll just share my screen and show you some terrible, what happens if you don't, with if you have very susceptible variety and don't control it.
So we can see your slideshow.
Yeah.
It's just the key points slide.
Yeah. I'll put this one down. Oh, so there you go.
So we've got the Gardner barley.
Yeah.
With radial.
Yeah. So that's untreated. You can see literally defoliate. So that yielded half that. So this is scaredness, so it's very susceptible to leaf scald, and that's leaf scald basically just killing the plant. So that's it just shows you how important in the Western District that the fungicides are. And we seem to be going to some varieties that are a bit more like Planet. It's got these disease packages and as good as some of the other ones, but yields more. So we seem to be going to varieties that are more susceptible to disease, but they yield more. So it means fungicides get more important, and hopefully they'll start improving, because you don't want something that's very susceptible, because it's a huge problem in the environment, because once you get pressure, so in this trial you have extreme pressure, and at the rates we have in Australia almost struggle to control it. So you've got to be really on the ball, something like that, get the timing right. So timing, standard timing is sort of Z30 with barley to sort of just before flag leaf or at flag leaf. But if you've got a really susceptible variety, you might have to do 3 sprays. Of course, disease is quite big this year, generally right throughout eastern seaboard. a lot of rust. Yeah, we're even getting powder mildew on wheat and things like that because of the conditions. It's about leaf wetness. Yeah, so hopefully we'll have some more options. A barley program, and we try and do things like use only one stravia a year and one SDHI a year. I think that in the Western District that'll be quite difficult, but we'll try and do that most years. And always mix with a DMI, and the DMIs are a bit different. So your propiconazole, your prothioconazole will control. If you get propiconazole resistance, it should control it. So we try and mix those up as well. So using a seed dressing or an in-furrow, and then putting on, maybe a stravia base to. If you're using an SDHI and a seed, well, you want a stravia-based product first, like a Top Notch or have Maxensis, and then maybe use Aviator as your next one, and using 2 SDHIs. We've got things like epoxy, you've got Opus or Soprano, so try and mix it up.
So the environmental conditions for the barley diseases, so what are the sort of the key ones for that?
Yeah, so it's all about leaf wetness and temperature. So if the more leaf wetness we get, the worse it tends to be, the higher in the infection period. So we get an infection period, and that's based on temperature. So with something like net form and net blotch, it's from sort of 8 degrees to 25 degrees. So those net blotches, it's got quite a decent range. So we tend to see them early, whereas scald operates at lower temperatures, and it's got a shorter latent period. So the time from infection, you've got to remember that what we see at the end is the end of the disease. So there's a latent period, which means the time you can't see the disease. And with scald, that's about 7 to 10 days. It operates, scald operates from sort of 10 degrees to 20 degrees. So as soon as we get infection period with the right temperatures, off we go. So in the Western District, we usually don't see that much disease during midwinter because it's too cold, but as it goes into spring, it takes off. So we've got to be on the ball.
Have we got any questions in the room? Go, Phil.
Al, can you update people on what's happening on the York Peninsula from the survey work that they've done on net form and net blotch, and the resistance to the SDHIs and the DMIs?
Yeah, I'm not an expert on that, but I have found, so we've found resistance to SDHIs, to net form, net blotch, and that was caused by using it 3 years in a row on a very susceptible variety, on the same paddock with the same stubble. So we really don't want to do barley on barley on barley on barley. So they do have resistance to net form and net blotch there. There's also been discovered resistance to SDHIs to the spot form of net blotch as well. That's over in WA. So it's really important. We want to keep these fungicides for as long as possible, and the strabies are just as susceptible as the SDHIs to resistance. That's why these mixes that we do are absolutely critical. We really shouldn't be putting the stravia or SDHI by itself. So if you use Sustiva, it's a really good idea to use 2 different modes of action later in the crop. So you don't use an SDHI after you've used Sustiva, for example. This is critical because we really only have 3 modes of action that are really good at the moment in Australia. But there are some more coming. So I think there's at least 1 or 2 others. So that's good.
Michelle, I'd just like to say to Al and to Greta, that was what was so good about your video, that you talked about the latent period and emphasised the fact that you've got to be a bit proactive about the management of fungicides with these crops, wheat and barley particularly, and the rotation, if you're on a good thing, you've got to change it type of thing, the use of every one of those modes of action, because certainly that's what's coming out of HYC in Tassie and is going to come across our work on the mainland. But even more importantly, I reckon we're just about to see, if it warms up next week with the wet leaf we've got, the biggest challenge with regard to cereals that we've seen in Western Victoria for a number of years. So thank you very much for your work and the clarity to which you put it, because again, now some of these videos are going to students. I think you really hit the nail on the head about a number of things that are hugely important that people didn't think about 20 years ago, that are the difference between making money or not making money in farming now. So well done.
Yeah, just one thing to support Dr. Grant Holloway, it's really important the resistance of varieties. And we can't underestimate how important that is. So, I've watched the commercial industry, and that's a bit of a farming system. So, the GRDC about that now. Yeah, they'll break down pretty quick. Fungicides are great, but they're not the answer.
Yeah, I've got a couple of comments and then a question. Well, I'll do the question first. Ramularia, because it is identified now that it's probably embedded in Victoria, especially southwestern Victoria and Tassie, and whether those fungicides have any, some or no good control. And the other one is just on the breeding side of it, that it's not my variety, but I would think that in the absence of new ones coming in the next season or two, if you really wanted to put barley close in rotation, which you shouldn't, but if you'd had to, I'd be going back and looking at Rosalind. I've got it in my trials, and by hell, it stands up to disease a lot better than most of the European stuff, and hardly got a spot on it in my unsprayed plots at Inverleigh, and it's a monster yield if it can.
Yeah.
It's just overlooked because it's feed only, but if you needed it for a rotation into barley on barley or something like that, in the absence of a new one coming out, Rosalind is better than some of the others. And don't forget Westminster. Westminster's got one of the best overall packages across all the diseases. It's way better than most on Scald, and it does pretty well on both of the blotches.
So with those comments, I have one in the chat box. What's your view on Systeva, Al?
It's a fantastic product. So it's awesome in barley. You'll see growth differences. It does concern me that we're putting an SHI out by itself. Maybe, I don't know, so I would mix it with Baytan, maybe. But yeah, it's absolutely critical that we treat different modes of action after that, because it's a recipe for disaster if you just rely on that too heavily. In the Western District, I'm not so worried because people will. In the North, it's a much greater problem because people won't, because it's a very good product. So it'll do a great job, but we want to keep it. So yeah, awesome product, but we're very conscious of the risk involved.
That was its downfall, in that people didn't put any second spray on. It worked right through to week 12, 14, and then they said, oh, well, it's quiet season. There's not much happening, but those one or two spots were the ones that were resistant.
Yeah. So yeah, just sort of be really conscious of it.
No worries. Oh, we've got another question. Hi, will you be doing any work on Maxentus for pulse crops, lentils and fava beans?
Yeah, so I should. Yeah.
Continue.
Oh, kickback. Yeah. Sorry, it dropped out. Didn't you? Yeah. So, yeah. So Maxentus won't come into those pulse crops. I think it's a few years. We've still got work to do, so I think it's about 3 years. But Make Senses will be registered in canola. It's an awesome canola product. So and wheat and barley and oats. It's an awesome oat product. Yeah, so we're looking at red letter leaf and oats and getting some really good results. So we'll have that. And we'll do aerial blackleg, and sclerotinia in canola. Yeah, the kickback of prothioconazole is as good as anything in most diseases. It's 12 days in striped rust, but I don't know the kickback in other diseases. Haven't seen that work, but it's yeah, it's pretty good.
Any more questions? I think we'll wrap it up there as a